Hello, everyone. Or hallo, as we say in German. I'm Raphael Davis, for those of you that do not know me. Um, and the presentation that I'm giving is on improving intercultural communication in the German workplace. As you can see, I started off with hello, and generally, genuinely want to know whether or not all is well with you guys. I hope that you guys have been having a great semester and a great time working on these presentations. And in German, it's Hallo, alles gut, um, which sounds like all is good. I'm a philosophy and international studies double major with a certificate in professional or workplace Spanish, and I'm currently in the intercultural communication class. Um, just a few reasons why you should care about the topic of improving um, intercultural communication in the German workplace. Mainly, a lot of these conversations come up around globalization. So the ideas really that are out there, one is that improving intercultural communication helps keep skilled employees. And whether you're leaving the United States and going to Germany or you're doing any other sort of international business, that still helps. Number two is that understanding intercultural challenges helps improve teamwork on the job. And then the third one is that roughly 1 in 5 foreigners in Germany currently were born outside of the country and they enter the workforce once they get there. So it's very relevant to talk about intercultural communication. So now I'm going to talk about the case. This case is actually very personal to me. If you look in this picture right here, you see myself and you see my uncle, and these are musicians that play with him. This one is Ricardo Doppio, and this one's Bobby van der Berg. This guy's from Italy, this guy's from Holland. It's my uncle. This is my aunt. My uncle's from the United States. My aunt is from there in Germany, and so these are her parents and her sister. And so we have obviously an intercultural family going on here. But I noticed while I was in uh, in Holland that my uncle was having some challenges in the workplace. And so here's the case background. I said my uncle is a Southern U.S. American who from Arkansas who migrated to Germany to live and work. And he sees no substantial problem with his work in the workplace, and he's really concerned about keeping his family life private, completely separate from work. Alice, who's not in the picture here, but she's a native German. She is concerned that my uncle's work performance is suffering, but she can't figure out what the problem is. So she's very interested and invested in her employees, and also sees my uncle as a friend. But my uncle reads the relationship a bit differently. Um, I, I should give you all more case background. Um, so while I was there, my uncle um, he found out some very saddening news about things that were going on at home. He lives in Germany. He's not as well connected as I am with our family here in the United States. And so he found out some very sad things, and he went into a depression. And he went into the kind of depression that caused him to fall asleep at work. He was sleepless at night, and for several nights, and I'd keep waking up in the middle of the night, and I'd go and check on him, and then he'd go to work. Uh, and when he would go to work, he'd fall asleep because he was so sleep deprived. It was at that point, it was his body was starting to shut down and be like, "No, I need sleep." And so his boss was saying, "There is something wrong with you. We need to talk about what's going on with your work." And my uncle's like, "No, I really want to keep this private. And also, I did everything that was asked of me. I don't understand why there's an issue." Um, and she was more concerned about his well-being. But there's a few things that we can learn about using the Olson's layered approach. And using Hofstede scores is that there's a difference in the culture between in the U.S. and the German cultures between individualism and collectivism. We see in the United States that the Hofstede score is much higher for individualism. It's a 91 in the United States, and it's a 67 in Germany. So they're more collectivistic than we are. Not to say very collectivistic. I think if we were to look at some African countries, we would find there that it's much more collectivistic. But more so than what we have in the United States. They're collectivistic. And this is affecting the communication going on in the workplace. Also, differences in power distance in interpersonal communication. The participants, my uncle's relational expectations with his boss. He's used to being in the United States where there's slightly higher power distance. This is a structured authority, and I'm uncomfortable breaking this structure, right? And as you can see, again, it's 35 for Germany and 40 for the United States. So not that far off, but there is some slight variation. So the context that influences this communication barrier is that they're having to address personal problems affecting work ethic. And so now I'll talk about the workplace and communication in Germany. And here I've defined power distance and individualism for you. Power distance being the strength of a societal hierarchy, and the extent to which people like my uncle, in the workplace can accept and expect that power is distributed equally or unequally. And then individualism, the habit of being self-reliant, seeing yourself as an individual rather than a member of a group. A couple of other things about the German workplace culture that I found really interesting was this idea of feel-good management, and that increasingly German managers try to make sure that the workers are feeling good, and they expect this workers feeling good to bring positivity into the workplace. And I mean, that sounds fairly reasonable, right? If you're in a good mood, you should be bringing in, and everybody else is in a good mood. Let's, even in a conflict, we're more than likely going to be able to get through that. And they make sure, again, collectivistic, they make sure to view the workers as people. And they're very interested in making sure that the whole person is well, right? If you're sick, hey, you take off work. We're not concerned about you coming in to to make up that time. Like, you're sick, you take care of yourself first. And that's really very much how German culture works. And so the difficulties in communication are power distance, organizational management, and those two things are tied together, and then the individualism versus collectivism. And I do apologize for repeating those things. But it seems a little bit excessive to you. So here's my analysis. It's basically two big things for power distance and organizational management is that my uncle was unfamiliar with the power distance in the German workplace, and that made him uncomfortable talking with his boss. And then also that was exacerbated by unfamiliarity with his boss Alice's organizational management style called feel-good management that's not generally practiced here in the United States. And then also that Alice thought of my uncle as a person in her community rather than an individual at her workplace. They live about 2 miles away from each other. In Germany, it's very common that outside of the workplace, you go and you participate in town parties. And they live in a small town, in a rural area that also may have some impact on this, in a town called Gebelsberg. So I have a few recommendations. The first one is that my uncle become more social by going to events with his coworkers outside of work, as it is a big part of the culture. And here's an example of how my uncle can do that. And if you need to, for time's sake, I'm going to try to get through these slides. But here's an example of how that can happen. The second one, so there was adopt, and now here's adapt. My uncle needs to openly negotiate power distance by having an open conversation with it. And he did, and it turns out himself and his boss were really able to work through that. And then the third one is synergy. Learn how to be both an individual and a group member by these two practices of adapting and adopting. And here are my references. Thank you. I hope you got something out of the presentation, and I hope you have a blessed rest of the day.